Guys, drop a like on the video in the next 5 seconds and you're guaranteed to get better at mouse and keyboard overnight. You'll wake up tomorrow and be much better than you are right now. But yeah, make sure you guys watch until the end of the video, because the longer you watch this video, the more you'll benefit from the tips. But yeah, let's get right into it. So as most of you guys know, I did switch to mouse and keyboard pretty recently, so I have learned a lot about switching your keybinds and choosing your keybinds and your sensitivity and all of that. So in this video, I will show you guys what I've learned and give you guys some tips so that you can become the best player as fast as possible. Alright, so the two main things with switching to mouse and keyboard, obviously, is going to be your sensitivity and your actual keybinds. So, before I get into my keybinds and what I suggest you use, I want to let you guys know that it's very important for you to actually think about what you choose before you do it, so that you don't practice for 2 weeks or something and then change your keybinds afterwards because you realize that you use really bad keybinds or something. Basically, this just means that you don't want to have some crazy keybinds as your main keys that you're going to use all the time. Like, you don't want to build a wall with 5 or something crazy like that where you have to stretch your hand out a lot. And to get a general idea of the main keybinds most people use, you can look up keybinds of like big YouTubers that are really good or just pro players, and you can get a general idea from that. But at the end of the day, it's really just about choosing what's going to work for you and then practicing with it and just getting used to it. And before I show my actual keybinds and sensitivity, I guess we can go over all this basic stuff. One main thing I would recommend, sprint by default. There's really no point in not having it on. Just an extra key you have to press for no reason. So I really recommend having that on. And then all this stuff is just extra. But one thing I do think helps a lot is confirm, edit, on release. If you start using confirm, edit, on release from the start, it'll help you out a lot. It'll be a lot easier at the beginning. And then it's a lot easier to start on edit on release rather than playing without it for 2 weeks or something and then putting it on. So I just recommend putting it on from the start. Yeah, like I said, all this stuff is just personal preference. Nothing too crazy. I'll show what I have just in case you guys care. Alright, so now we're going to hop into my settings, like my actual sensitivity and keybinds. So to start off, my sensitivity, I use 9.5 for X and Y. And then the targeting scope, it's kind of high. I haven't really messed with this too much. I don't really see much difference between having it way higher or way lower. It definitely doesn't have nearly as much effect on your gameplay as X and Y does, obviously. So that's mine right there. And I'm currently on 1200 DPI. I was on this same sensitivity and 800 DPI, but I recently got a new mouse, so I had to switch my DPI up a little bit. But yeah, the reason I had to switch my DPI, just my new mouse felt a little different. So this is where the sensitivity is really just subjective to what you have. Like, my sensitivity is gonna feel way different than yours if you have like a different mouse, for example, or a different mouse pad, because different mouse pads glide better and just have a higher like sensitivity on them, you know what I'm saying? Because your mouse slides across them easily and some don't. So it really just depends on what you have, and you have to kind of adjust it to what works for you. The mouse I had when I first started mouse keyboard was the Razer Death Adder, but after a couple weeks I got a glorious Model D, and like I said, that just felt a little different, so I had to change the DPI. So that just shows that depending on what mouse or what mouse pad you end up using, you're gonna have to kind of fiddle with your sensitivity or your DPI. Obviously, the higher DPI you have, the higher sensitivity it is and stuff. And I wouldn't really recommend having some crazy high DPI, but at the end of the day, it's all personal preference and what you can handle and what you prefer. So all this stuff is pretty basic. Most people have pretty much the same thing right here. Maybe your crouch and my reload, maybe that's switched or something. Doesn't really matter too much. I bring out my pickaxe with T, I open chest and stuff with R. None of that really matters too much. But my weapon slots are a lot different than a lot of people's. A lot of people don't really use their mouse wheel or anything for weapons, but I do. So I actually press my mouse wheel in to bring out my AR, and then I scroll my mouse wheel down to bring out my shotgun, which that's different, but like I said, it's all about what you're used to. And then I bring out my SMG with E, whatever's in my third slot, maybe like a sniper or something, and then X is 4, and usually my heals are 4 and 5, so X or Z. If I only have one heal, I use Z. Doesn't really matter too much. Alright, so moving into the really important stuff, your actual building bonds. As you see, crouch is left shift. I have wall at Q. Some people say that wall being Q is kind of bad because it kind of affects your movement, but it's not too bad for me. I see some pro players using Q and stuff. It's not that big of a deal. As long as you don't have like all of these, like all around WASD where it really throws off your movement, you're fine. If you have a mouse with buttons on it, it helps a lot. As you see, floor and stair are both on the side of my mouse, so that works out pretty well. And then I have cone as C. Don't really use cones too much. I think C is pretty good for it, and then trap is V. Traps aren't really used hardly any now, just launch pads, so it's over there at V. But yeah, you really want to make sure you're not messing yourself up with these, with your main binds by putting it to something that's going to mess up your movement. So you don't want to make all these main binds like E or R or Q. You don't want all these binds to be all around your movement because you need to have fingers on the movement binds, obviously, to move around while you're building stuff. And that's where a mouse really helps out, especially if you have the buttons. So if you don't have a mouse with buttons, I would really recommend getting one. Like I said, I have the Glorious Model D. You can also get a Glorious Model O if you have smaller hands. But yeah, that's the mouse I have. I think it's really good. So this other stuff doesn't really matter too much. Kind of just rotate. Don't really use that. Repair can be whatever. Then building edit is F for me, and mouse wheel up is a secondary, and then reset is right click, but I don't use right click. I use scroll wheel up. Scroll wheel reset. I have a video explaining how to do that. If you guys don't know how to use scroll wheel reset, I'll probably leave a link to that in the description and the pinned comment or whatever. It's also on my channel, obviously. So you guys can just check that video out if you don't know how to use scroll wheel reset. Highly recommend it. It will definitely help your reset speed and everything, just your edit speed overall. But yeah, as you guys see, change the build material, right click, that's pretty standard. Crouch while editing, left shift, same as crouch, whatever, while building. Then the rest of the stuff is really nothing too crazy, it doesn't really matter. Place a marker with G, like stuff like that, all up to you. Doesn't really matter too much. So yeah, one thing that's really different about my bonds from a lot of people is you guys have probably already noticed that I don't use numbers for anything. The only thing I use a number for is 5 right here from my auto run. But yeah, I don't really feel comfortable reaching all the way up to the numbers to press stuff. That could be different for you. You could use numbers as like your main like weapon slots or something. But that's just personal preference. Like I said, at the end of the day, all this stuff is personal preference with a little bit of like optimal bonds mixed in. Like obviously you can have really, really bad bonds that screw you over, but at the end of the day, if you're used to them, you can make them work. But yeah, like I said, at the end of the day, all this stuff really does come down to personal preference and what you get used to. So after you choose your bonds, as long as they're not something bad that's holding you back or your sensitivity is something like really bad, just choose it and stick with it, and that'll be your best bet. Like you don't want to spend 2 weeks on these bonds and then you watch another YouTube video and change your bonds because of that. You really just want to stick with it, and that'll help you in the long run because you don't have to restart and relearn stuff. All this stuff just comes down to personal preference, like I said time and time again. Just your time practicing it. The more you practice, the better you'll get, obviously. And like I said, it's a lot better to stick with one thing rather than switching it up every couple weeks. If you guys do end up using my exact keybinds, let me know in the comments. But yeah, if you do use my keybinds, they will help you a lot. Or just use what I said in this video and kind of take that and put it towards your own keybinds, because it is all personal preference and what you can get used to. A couple of the main things I would recommend for you regardless of your keybinds, I think there's really no reason to not have scroll or reset. It just helps out a ton overall. Really don't see any reason in not using it. And also, I highly recommend not having all of your main building bonds like on keys and stuff. I really do think mouse buttons help out a ton. As you can see, my ramp and my floor are on my mouse. But yeah, there are pro players and stuff that don't use any mouse buttons, so it is all up to you at the end of the day and what you can get used to. That pretty much wraps up the video right there, guys. I hope this video did help you guys out. You actually use some of this information and apply it to your own keybinds and settings. But like I said many times, at the end of the day, it's all up to you and what you get used to. But yeah, make sure you guys hit that like button on the video, comment, I watched the entire video if you did watch until this point. But yeah, I appreciate y'all. Make sure you guys subscribe and turn on those post notifications, and I'll see y'all in the next video.